Have you ever wondered who would win in a fight between the ore farming Pokemon Lucario and the king of fighting games himself, Ryu? Welcome everyone to another episode of Olympic Fiction, the series where we put fictional characters in Olympic events to see who is the best of the best. And for today's Olympic event, we have a karate match between Lucario from Pokemon and Ryu from Street Fighter. Now, for anyone who thinks this is just going to be a normal fight between two video game characters, I must say, no. Sir, you are incorrect. For anyone who doesn't know, for any legitimate professional karate match, there are rules. Rules that cannot be broken by any means. Rules that will completely throw this debate on its head, just like every episode in the series. Now, if you're wondering what rules make this matchup such a big deal, well, not most of them, but one big rule that I will be considering for this debate: sportsmanship. Okay, it's not technically a rule, but it is very important in any professional karate match. Karate matches are not just mindless violence and punching, but showing off one's skill and strength through respect, which is why both Ryu and Lucario are going to be kind of handicapped. You see, any behavior that resembles anything somewhat unsportsmanship is never going to be allowed in any actual karate match. So, for certain moves and transformations from these characters just aren't going to be allowed, like Evil Ryu. And since this entire contest is built on skill and martial arts, I'm also going to make the tough call and remove any special powers or magical abilities that both these characters have. I don't want this to just be a super-powered fight to the death. Karate matches are, like I said, are a sport to show one's skill in martial arts. I don't want Lucario or Ryu's magical powers to take away from that. So for this fight, the only moves and techniques these characters can use are with their bare hands, physical attacks, and fighting techniques. All physical attacks and fighting techniques that these characters know. Nothing magical, no special powers, just their bare fists and legs. And I guess shoulders too, but you get the idea. So there was not going to be any moves like Bone Rush or Hadokens, nor transformations like Mega Lucario, and definitely not Evil Ryu. Nothing but strength, speed, and skill. So, with all that out of the way, let's actually get into this debate and see who is the winner of this episode of Olympic Fiction. Okay, let's start with fighting styles. Ryu's fighting style has been a little complicated over the years, but usually Ryu's fighting style is a combination of karate, judo, and boxing, which I did not expect. And it's also important to mention that a lot of Ryu's early training was from his teacher / father figure, Goken, who trained him in Atsuti. Of course, this is not all of Ryu's training. Ryu has been training for basically his entire life. Fight after fight, no matter what he goes through, no matter what opponent he faces, it only fills him to keep fighting, opponent after opponent. And he's never stopped. His entire life has basically been his training. Then you have Lucario. Now is probably a good time to explain what Lucario I'm referring to, since Lucario is a Pokemon. There are multiple different Lucarios in the Pokemon world. And the quick and simple answer, all of them. Kinda. Okay, I guess I should explain. I'm somewhat going to be combining all Lucarios into one for this video. So basically, take any move that Lucario has, any move Lucario can learn, I'm gonna give it to him. I'm going to put it all in Lucario's arsenal. Basically just everything from the video games. That being said, I will not be taking anything from the Pokemon anime or manga. We're just sticking to the video games for this video. If you want, maybe I can make a sequel video including the anime and manga, but for now, we're just sticking with the video games. Now, like I said before, since we're not including any of Lucario's more magical, more powerful attacks, there are a lot of moves and attacks that Lucario is not going to be allowed to use for this event. Some of which are fighting attacks, but a lot of them are more superpower-ish, if that's the right way to say that. Point is, there are a decent amount of moves that Lucario is just not going to be able to use. And I did in fact have to go over every single move to check what he can do, which was easily the most annoying part of making this video. And since there are still a couple to go through, I'm just going to save on time and just go over every single one that he can use. That's also useful. Since Lucario is a Pokemon, some of his moves are more status effects that weaken his opponent's stats or boost his stats, which some are kind of useful, but others are, again, lean more into magical superpowers. So if you're wondering why I haven't mentioned one of Lucario's best moves, it's probably because of that. So, in no particular order, Lucario can use Force Palm, Reversal, Close Combat, and Bullet Punch. And I know there are more moves Lucario would be able to use, but these moves specifically are just the best moves Lucario can use in this very specific situation. And I suppose it is important to mention that since Lucario fights in Pokemon battles, which are basically just RPG fights with turn-based combat, Lucario doesn't have the clearest fighting style. Most of his moves are just punches and kicks, but they're very powerful punches and kicks. And the reason that is, and the reason why Lucario is such a powerful Pokemon in the first place, is his aura. And I mean that literally. Like, literally, he has a power source in him that is called aura. And I know, I said no magical powers, but this is something that is inside Lucario. A power source that he can tap into, that gives him strength, that gives him life in battles. The more he fights, the more power he gains, the more strength he gains. Through battles and combat and pain, he grows stronger because of the aura that is inside him, that he draws from to become as powerful as he is. So, the Force, basically. I mean, not really, but really. Not to say aura is inferior or anything like that. Aura is still a very powerful source that Lucario can tap into. And I know most Lucarios, even the ones that are trained by trainers, probably don't have as much skill or experience as Ryu, since their training is exclusively from Pokemon trainers, so basically children. But the skill that all trained or not trained Lucarios have, just naturally in them, all that power that makes them one of the most skillful Pokemon to exist, it more than makes up for it. So, both these fighters clearly have their advantages. It's safe to say that Lucario is indeed faster and stronger, with moves like Bullet Punch being compared to the speed of bullets, hence the name, not to mention just some of the Pokemon that Lucario fights against that are just made of rock, or concrete, or just metal. Yes, Ryu has fought some pretty tough opponents too, but I still think it's safe to say Lucario is just a little bit stronger and faster. But Ryu does have much better training and experience than Lucario, since Ryu has had actual training from an actual martial artist, as compared to most Lucarios who are, again, trained by children. And another thing Ryu has that a lot of Lucarios, even trained Lucarios, often struggle with is control, especially in battles. Ryu is not one often to lash out when in battles, never really losing his temper or control. But when you compare this to most Lucarios, they are very capable of lashing out against their opponents and even their trainers sometimes. When they get too into battle, they can start to lose it and just go completely enraged, which in a professional Olympic karate match is basically a guarantee disqualification. So, Ryu has the mindset and the experience in his favor, and Lucario has the greater strength and speed. This seems like another pretty tight debate, but there is one very specific part of this event that not only helps one of these opponents, but completely ruins any chances for the other. You see, Lucario is a very tough opponent to fight. In pretty much any Pokemon battle, no matter what Pokemon he's fighting, he is an extremely tough Pokemon to beat. But if you take Lucario out of that, then you have a problem. Now, yes, I know Lucario is obviously more than capable of competing in a karate match, without a doubt. But when it comes to Pokemon, even the Pokemon that are able to fight in karate matches like this, that doesn't necessarily mean they're trained for different competitions. Most, if not all, Pokemon are trained for Pokemon battles. Maybe not all, but most of them, and especially most Lucarios, which, although some Pokemon battles can be like karate matches, Pokemon battles are definitely not karate matches. I had to take away half of Lucario's moves just for him to compete in this event to begin with. And sure, Ryu does have some special powers that he wouldn't be able to use. And of course, a lot of the fights that Ryu gets himself in are street fights with no rules whatsoever. But if you force Ryu to fight in a karate match where he's only allowed to use his bare hands, Ryu will have a much easier time with those restrictions compared to Lucario. With Lucario not being allowed to lash out, not being allowed to Mega Evolve, not being allowed to use half of his entire moveset, Lucario is going to struggle a lot more than Ryu. And even with him being stronger, even with him being faster, I just don't think Lucario is going to be able to fight on the same level as Ryu in this very specific event. That being said, Lucario is a very powerful Pokemon, one of the most skillful Pokemon in the entire franchise. But put up against Ryu in a karate match, as close as this matchup is, after looking at this fight from every single angle I could, I think I can safely say the winner in this event is probably the greatest martial artist in all of video games and fiction, Ryu, who will be taking home the gold.